All right, we gotta keep going because we're gonna do that quiz. Dang it! So we're gonna get done. We got some stuff we can skip, thankfully. All right, here we go. So the pancreas. The pancreas is also in another one of our organ systems. Do you remember that one? The one everyone hates? What's that one called? Endocrine. I said the huh? The pancreas is also in the endocrine. What does it do in the endocrine system? What's the pancreas? Oh, okay. Thank God. I thought the power just went out. I freaked out. Huh? So what? Anybody? What does the pancreas do in the endocrine? Yeah, insulin and glucagon. Those two hormones that help regulate our blood glucose. So insulin lowers it. Glucagon helps raise it. So the digestive role, it plays a huge role in the digestive system too. So it's an endocrine gland that does a role in the endocrine system, but you remember that little bit about endocrine and exocrine? Do you kind of remember that? Endocrine means that it secretes stuff into the bloodstream. Exocrine meant it secretes stuff through ductwork systems. So this is where that exocrine part comes in the digestive system. The pancreas makes some enzymes that help us digest food and releases them through a ductwork system to meet up with the common bile duct and dump all this in the duodenum, which we're about to talk about, all this here. You can ignore the body of work section down there on page 435. That's talking about stuff that triggers it releasing. I'm not going to stress you out about those, so don't worry about that stuff. We're going to look at a chart. There's a chart later in the book that's going to be your research tool for learning enzymes. But here's the kicker with the pancreas. The pancreas is so vital because it secretes enzymes that target all three of our components, okay? All three. And I think I failed to mention this again, but if you listen to my video lecture, I should have mentioned it. The stomach secretes something called pepsin, which helps digest protein. Bile helps us digest fat, right? It helps. The pancreas has enzymes that help us digest all three of those: protein, fats, and sugars. So it makes it a huge vital part of the digestive system too. It acts as an exocrine gland, makes these enzymes and secretes them through a ductwork system that meets up with the common bile duct, and they all dump their stuff here into the small intestine right here. So we'll look at that, but yeah, basically the book summarizes the enzymes. They help break down lipids, proteins, what's lipids is fats, and carbohydrates, which is sugars. And here's I made a chart with the stuff. There's a chart later we'll look at, but this is what they're called. So we have something called proteasis. Here's a hint with some of these enzymes. Some of the enzymes of the digestive tract, a big thing for this is in the anatomy of the digestive tract and kind of what organ in the digestive system secretes what enzyme. So in this case, the pancreas does all three. It has something that covers all three of them. So proteasis is actually two, but I'm not going to stress you out about memorizing trypsin and chymotrypsin because why? That's just too much. So proteasis is just these digestive enzymes from the pancreas that help us digest protein. Protein starts with a P. Proteasis kind of sounds like protein. It starts with a P. You'll notice a theme when you look at all the enzymes. A lot of the enzymes, if they start with a P, they're probably helping us digest proteins. Lipase and amylase. If you listen to my video lecture, those should sound familiar. There's somewhere else that secretes those as well in the digestive system. You might remember? It's okay. It's not in the book. It's not in the book. This is not a chart that's in the book. I added this to summarize it for you. It talks about them later. The book doesn't break it up as well as I like, so I'm trying to lump it together. These are the enzymes of the pancreas. Lipase and amylase are actually shared enzymes that saliva makes. Our saliva makes both of these too, or is in our saliva. So the pancreas makes these. Lipase helps us digest lipids, aka fat. Amylase helps us digest starch, aka it's a type of sugar. So all three categories are covered by the pancreas. That's what makes it so important. So flipping over is page 436. That's small intestine. Let's keep chugging through these structures. So now we're kind of diving back into the actual respiratory. We're diving back into the digestive tract where food is going. The liver, gallbladder, pancreas are all accessory organs. You guys hear me there? Accessory. They accessorize the digestive tract, okay? They help it. They help digest stuff. But food does not touch them, okay? So food is now chyme, right? We've established that it's called chyme in the stomach. Chyme moves out of the pyloric sphincter. Chyme goes into the first part of the small intestine called the duodenum, which is right here. This small section here. And the duodenum, the way the book says it, is the site of most digestive processes. So, key note, I made it key point that the stomach is not absorbing nutrients. The duodenum, the first part of the small intestine, is not about absorbing nutrients. It's all about still digestion. But it makes sense. What happens in the duodenum? Bile gets pushed in there, and all these enzymes from the pancreas get put in there. So this is where most digestive, most breaking down of food happens right here in the duodenum, okay? So when my chyme hits the duodenum, that is where most digestion takes place, because think about all the enzymes and the bile and everything that's dumped in there, okay? It's about 10 inches or so in length. I'll tell you the length, but the book tells us length, but that doesn't matter. We have about 20 some odd feet of intestines packed in here. Small intestines, 20 some odd feet. Crazy, but irrelevant to know. It's the nuts to know. It's interesting, but it's nuts to know. That's why I know it, because I'm a nut job. All right, so the next section of the small intestine is called the jejunum. It's that J word, jejunum. So after I've left this 10-inch section or so of the duodenum, I'm in the jejunum now, which is all this guy here. Just small intestines wrapped around small intestines. This is where most absorption takes place. Absorption is the other thing of our digestive system. So far, all we've been trying to do is break food down. Now, we are trying to make sure we absorb all the nutrients from it. That's the jejunum's job. Jejunum is all about nutrient absorption, getting all that stuff in. The last section of the small intestine is called the ileum. It's down here towards the end. The ileum is still doing absorption here. The book also notes that this is the location of our Peyer's patches, if you remember some of those. Peyer's patches, anyone remember what they do? There's a question on this test today. Bacteria. They're lymphatic tissues that's about monitoring our bacteria levels. Lymphatic tissue that monitors our bacteria levels. So they're usually embedded in this ileum section, but the ileum is just the last section, the last part of our small intestine. And note, the book makes this point in the fast fact. It's called small intestine because it's a small diameter, right? It's really long. It's 20 feet long. We have the next section that we talk about is the large intestine. It's large because its diameter is bigger, not because it's longer. Does that make sense? So it's talking about diameter. Small intestine is because its diameter is smaller. It's thinner. Large intestine is large because its diameter is bigger. It's larger. So bottom of page 436 has this picture in the body of work. Two things here. Segmentation and peristalsis. Some of you might have heard of peristalsis before, maybe, but if you haven't, that's okay. So these are two types of what they would call gastric, or maybe they would call them intestinal motility. Motility just means movement, guys. I don't know if you've never heard that word, but motility just means like movement. That's all it means. How do you move, okay? So our small intestine does this all the time. Remember those layers if you saw the lecture, there's layers of our digestive system. Mucosa, submucosa, muscularis, serosa. So muscularis, all of our digestive system has a muscular layer around them. And so they do segmentation, which is pinching the food. This is actually a form of some mechanical digestion. We're still digesting food. Remember, our body is like not a wasteful thing. Our body is trying to maximize potential all the time, right? So we actually use segmentation to help. It helps move food. It's not food, excuse me, chyme. It helps move the chyme through the intestines, but it also kind of pinches it off and keeps breaking food apart. So segmentation actually falls under mechanical digestion still, because it's breaking down food by pinching off and expanding, pinching off and still breaking it up. The big one, though, is peristalsis. Peristalsis is our muscle can do like this wave-like motion. This wave-like motion helps propel food where it's supposed to go. So if you listen to someone's stomach with a stethoscope, which you will get taught to do as a nurse, you're listening for bowel sounds. What are bowel sounds? Typically, there's a sound of peristalsis. There's a sound of the intestines doing this movement or segmentation. It sounds like a gurgle, like that. That's what it sounds like. You're listening for that. You should have this movement somewhere going on. That's what you're listening for. And that's why they teach you, technically, by the book, if I listen to someone and I don't hear any bowel sounds, I don't hear this gurgling sound, I'm supposed to sit there and listen for a whole minute, whole 60 seconds, before I say they don't have any, because we should always have our bowels moving, even if there's no food, okay? They should always be active. If they're not, that could indicate a problem, a nervous system problem, a blockage. That could indicate a lot of problems. So segmentation, peristalsis, these are our types of intestinal motility, intestinal movement, okay? What's next? I forgot. What's the purpose of the gallbladder? Go back, see if you remember. What's the purpose of the gallbladder? Store. What are you laughing at? Oh. That's me too, my whole life. I came out the womb confused. All right. It doesn't secrete anything. It doesn't produce anything. It only stores bile. That's it. It's just a storage in concentrating bile. Intestinal lining is talked about on page 437. There's not too much I need you to stress about here. I'm just making the point. Do you guys remember way back when, poke your brains a little bit, way back when at the beginning of this class, we had chapter 3 that was about cells. Does that feel like a long time ago, maybe? No? You remember that chapter somewhat, right? Maybe? No? Oof. Cells, chapter 3? A little bit, okay. Do you remember talking about cytoskeletons and things like cilia, microvilli, flagella, that sort of stuff? Okay, villi and microvilli are coming up here. So our intestines, especially the jejunum and the ileum, look like this. They are lined with these ridges that they call, it looks like this. If I zoom in on this picture, so here's your intestine. The 4 layers of all my digestive tract: mucosa, submucosa, muscularis, serosa. That's what it looks like. If I zoom in, it looks like this. All of those little areas have these ridges, see that, called villi. And all the villi, so villi looks like this, they all have cells on them that have ridges on them called microvilli. Now, what are all these big ridges supposed to do for us? Nope. Nope. Hey, you got it. Help us increase absorption. Remember, our body is so good at not wasting anything, right? So if you imagine this on the microscopic level, right, like zooming in on this picture, we're looking at a piece of intestine, but if I zoom in, it looks like this. This is like ridges upon ridges upon ridges, right? What does that do? If I draw a straight line, right, from point A to point B, would you say that is the same length as the distance this covers, right? No, yeah, it is. Like I'm saying, like if I measure a piece of intestine, it looks like this. If I took a 1-inch piece of intestine, it's going to take up the same space. But if I grab this and stretch it out, it's going to be way longer than that line. You see what I'm saying? So increasing surface area, the amount of surface that the food has the ability to touch. So food is going to wedge up against these guys and wedge down in this villi, the microvilli, wedge down in here, wedge down in here. What does that do? Allows food time to get processed, to get absorbed. The more surface area means the better my absorption is going to be. If my intestines were like buttery smooth, like my blood vessels, everything I eat would run straight through me like I just ate Taco Bell, okay? Some people deal with those foods better than others. I'm just joking. I don't know. I can still deal with Taco Bell sometimes. Depends. Yeah, at home. Yeah, I'm a real psychopath. We eat Waffle House every Sunday morning before church, and we're at church for about 6 hours usually. So, because I always just work at church. I do both services. I run the broadcast media team, so I'm there every Sunday from about 6:30, 7 a.m. to noon or 1. So, and I eat Waffle House, and sometimes I make it. Sometimes I don't. Yeah, gotta pray it away. Lord, pray the gut demons away. All right. But it helps us with surface area, guys, right? Slows the food absorption down so we can not waste one molecule of nutrients from the food. Does that make sense, what we're saying? So all you need to know is that the small intestine has villi with cells on them that have microvilli. So if you hear villi or microvilli, it's talking about these ridges. The small intestine. And what they're showing you here is, they call this structure the lacteal. I'm not stressing you know the word lacteal, but they're calling, so you see what they're showing you in this picture is that each villi has its own little blood flow and it's lymphatic. It has its own little capillary, you see that? So that means that each ridge in my small intestine has its own capillary, really. And so it has its own ability to kind of absorb all that nutrients, which is great, right? That means that our body's not wasting nothing. It ain't going to waste a thing, okay? Let's just skip that. That's not needed for this. Okay, so that's all with the small intestine. Last time we got to talk about is the large intestine, but if you see, page 438 and 439 have this big chart. They have pictures and they tell you what enzyme is made where, how it digests the sugars, how it digests the proteins, and how it digests the fat. I think this is a nice couple pages for reference, but I think the best way to learn these is flip the page to 441 there. You'll see a chart labeled key digestive enzymes on 441. Y'all see that? So key digestive enzymes is the best way to kind of study what enzyme is what. So you can see that saliva glands, salivary glands make amylase and lipase, and it tells you what they break down. Amylase breaks down starch, lipase fat. You see that? Stomach makes pepsin, P-E-P-S-I-N, breaks down protein. Pancreas has 3, remember, proteases, lipase, and amylase, which are amylase and lipase are shared. They're the same enzyme as the saliva glands have. Intestines have some enzymes still. You see, we're never not breaking down food still. Even in the intestines, where we're doing most of our absorption, we're still trying to break down food even further so we don't waste one bit of useful nutrients from our food. And so we have some stuff that breaks down peptides, which falls in the category of proteins, pepsidases. And then we have stuff you've probably heard of before, sucrose, lactose, maltose. They break down sucrose, sucrase, lactase, maltase. You've heard of lactase or lactose before, right? Yeah. That's milk sugar. Sucrose, cane sugar, and maltose is as malt sugar, which they use that's like the worst one, but whatever. So you can see that chart. That's a star, that's a highlight, that's a circle, that's a smiley face, that's a asterisk. I don't know what else. What do you put on there? Highlight. Because what I usually tell people is when I'm studying this, the best way to do is make sure you know the anatomy of the digestive organs and the enzymes. The way you do that is you kind of use both of these. So I think page 438 and 439 are just good. They're a good reference page. I wouldn't say there's anything that's new. There's not new information here. So I would really just use this as pictures in a way to help you understand these enzymes and how they work. But there's nothing on those 2 pages that I think is like a big deal, except if you see on that page, that's where they actually talk about, they actually highlight the word emulsification. You see it on fats. So I think they'd say that out of order. But those pages to me are just good reference pages for that chart. That chart should be how you want to learn it. What goes where. I think the page 438 and 439 is just too convoluted. The pictures are nice, so it gives you an idea of what to look for. But other than that, I don't think there's anything you need to like exactly exclusively study from there. You need to study that chart. You need to know what enzyme goes where, okay? Okay, large intestine. We got to talk about the large intestine. We got to talk about our poop chute. I'm just kidding. That's a watch too many Deadpool movies. All right. So our large intestine, again, is called large because it's a bigger diameter. Not that it's longer. It's shorter than our small intestines overall. Its role is basically to turn chyme into feces. That's what it's trying to do. So it's trying to turn whatever we were using and absorbing into waste, into feces. Yep, reabsorb water. So a lot of what our large intestine's role is, remember that chyme is like a semi-mixture. Again, kind of think of throughout your small intestine, it's more liquid and liquid until you get to the large intestine. It's where stool starts to solidify more. I guess, and I don't have a better term than saying like a turd, I guess. I mean, if you want to just be dumb with it, I guess, but, right? You can tell a lot about how someone's diet is. You can tell a lot about how, a lot about a patient from stool. I'm sorry, you can. But if my stool is really runny and liquidy, it's telling me that it didn't spend enough time in the colon, and there's a reason for that. What the reason is could be a number of things, but that's telling me that it didn't get a lot of liquid reabsorbed. And so that's not a consistent, bowel movement you want to have. Our job of our colon, our large, it's also called the colon. The whole thing really can be referred to as the colon, is all about reabsorbing fluid. And again, just changing the consistency of whatever this chyme was into a waste product, getting rid of it. So there is some absorption of nutrients here, but there's not a lot. Most of it's dedicated to just letting that chyme run its course and turn into feces, okay? So the sections of your large intestine. First, we have the ileum coming off the small intestine. The first section we hit is called the cecum. C-E-C-U-M, cecum. That's also where your appendix is. If you guys remember the appendix, your appendix is a little tail off of the cecum. It just helps. The appendix is another lymphatic tissue area. It's got some white blood cells in there, defends us against pathogens, that sort of stuff. And what I always tell people too is that our colon, our large intestine, is like a picture frame for the intestines. Right? You see that? It kind of picture frames the intestines. It makes this nice kind of picture frame around them. And that's how it goes. So if that chyme has now made it into the cecum, it's going to travel up the ascending colon. Ascending colon. So it's traveling up the ascending colon. Then it travels across the transverse colon, which makes sense if I transversing, I'm going across, I'm going this way. Then that stool is going to go down the descending colon. Then it reaches a section I like to call the sigmoid colon, or I like to call the S of the colon for sigmoid. Because it's kind of an S. It's not really, but I'm stretching that a little bit. But it does like this curve like this. It does like a little really sharp curve before it bends back. So it's not entirely an S, but it's kind of like an S. But that helps remember if someone says sigmoid colon, I know I'm talking about this section of the large intestine. I'm talking about down towards the end of the line here. And so the last section is where it straightens up. And that's the rectum. This last section is the rectum here. Technically, at the very end, you would have what they call the anal canal, which is where the anus is on the outside. And that's like the final resting point of stool before it hits the toilet. But sigmoid, rectum, anal canal is so small, it's kind of its own thing. I will make a point with this about the anal canal, though, that's interesting, because this actually comes up with our urinary system. We actually, in our anal canal, we have two sphincters. Remember a sphincter? Smooth muscle band. Kind of acts like a valve, kind of a stopgap. We have two. We have an internal and an external anal sphincter. Why would we have two? Yeah. So basically, guess what? The internal sphincter is smooth muscle, which we don't have control over, right? Guess what the external one is? Skeletal muscle, which is voluntary. We have control over that. So now, does it make a little bit more sense now? We have two sphincters, so we don't have to wear diapers still right now. We're like, oh, if we didn't have two sphincters, we'd be like, I got to go to the bathroom real quick. Bathroom break, We'd all have to have diapers on. Because what it does is that smooth muscle sphincter, we don't have control over it. If feces and stool hit that area, we're going to feel the pressure like we have to go to the bathroom. Our ability to hold it and not poo on ourselves comes from the skeletal muscle of the external sphincter. So we can hold it. And of course, as a baby up to a toddler, we have to learn how to control this. But it's skeletal muscle on the outside, so we can learn how to control that voluntarily. This works the same for our urethra, for peeing. So I'll talk about that with the urinary system. Same system. Our urethra has an internal and an external sphincter. Same setup. Internal smooth muscle, external skeletal. Same scenario, right? So again, that you don't just pee on yourself. You have the ability to feel the pressure of the internal sphincter opening up, but you can hold it with the external sphincter until you get to the bathroom. That's all its purpose is. Life lesson changes with aging on 441. It goes back to this conversation a bit about the enema. That's why I talked about the enema thing this morning. And so the older we get, all this stuff slows down. Think about it. It takes a lot of muscles to swallow. Everything from like the mouth all the way down the anus is full of muscles. The older we get, the muscles get weaker and less responsive. Our nervous system gets less responsive. All this stuff slows down. So peristalsis, segmentation, this stuff tends to slow down the older we get. And if you combine that with medications that also cause it to slow down and cause constipation, like one of the big culprits of constipation, anybody know what medicine it might be? Pain medicine, narcotics. Narcotics are notorious for causing constipation. So if you add all that up, right, you can slow stuff down pretty easily. And that life lesson also talks about geriatric patients, so people that are older in that I forget what the actual age range for geriatrics is, but those people tend to also not eat that well because they lose some of their sense of smell, some of their sense of taste. And so if stuff doesn't taste real well and it doesn't smell real good, why am I going to bother to get up in the kitchen and make food, especially if it's hard for me to get around and actually get to the kitchen? So people go without eating. They go without drinking because it's not enjoyable as much anymore.